Well, it happened long, long ago, and Mary and Joseph, they traveled many, many miles from one town to another, and there we had it, the very first Christmas, and we celebrate that here today. And let me tell you, as a pastor, I don't know if you can relate with this, maybe you can, maybe you can't, but there's a lot of pressure for a pastor to come up with something new on Christmas Eve. And I don't know if you've been there, but it's difficult to find something new in a story. You got to keep the same every year. But let me tell you, the Bible is great because you can always pull something new out of it, no matter how many times you talk about the same thing. And we'll attempt to do that tonight because I really just want you to know one thing as you leave here today. If you could have one thing that you head off with, that you celebrate tomorrow, you think about throughout your week, it's this. If you knew the heart of God, you would say yes to Him. If you knew the heart of God, you would say yes. If you knew that He overcame so that you could overcome, you would say yes to God. You see, sometimes I don't think we say yes to God because we're kind of confused by what is good, maybe what is not so good. It's kind of like this picture. I mean, every year we take our kids to go see Santa. And we have Grayson, he's 7. And we have Beckett, he's 3. And my youngest Bowen, he's 6 months. And normally the picture is of them crying. But this year they weren't crying. But Bowen, he's sitting there and he doesn't really know what to think, right? He's maybe going to smile, maybe going to cry. Maybe he's got something in his diaper. We're not sure what's going on. But he's like, I don't know whether this is good or bad. He's kind of confused at the prospect of Santa. But we know, Bowen, that Santa's good, man. Santa's good. He's not bad. He's good. He brings good gifts. You don't got to be confused about it. But I think a lot of times we are confused about God and the gifts that He brings and how He relates with us and how we relate with Him. And so it reminds me of of this video that I'm going to show you, and it's a WestJet video from several years ago at Christmas. And many of you saw the commercial, but maybe you didn't see the full-length video of what went on. And I'm going to show you the whole thing. I'm going to show you a full-length video of this WestJet thing that happened. Just a marketing genius that took place. And while you watch that, I want you to think about who you would like to be in this video and who you would not like to be in this video. Okay, who you want to be and who you don't want to be. And then I'm going to ask you about that at the end of the video, okay? So let's check it out.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all across the land, the good folks of WestJet had a miracle planned. On the eve before flying, the guests were in their beds. Visions of traveling danced in their heads. While out on the runway, something secret had arrived. It was left in the lounge. 'Twas a Christmas surprise.
This year, Cohen? A choo-choo train? A classic. Do you like Thomas? What would Mommy and Daddy like for Christmas?
Big TV.
Yeah, big TV.
A big TV. You're looking fabulous.
Well, I need to.
It's okay if you just want to stare at me as well.
What I need is new socks and underwear.
An Android tablet.
Is that William beside you? And Cameron?
Some Santa boots.
Duck stuff and stuff.
While the guests told their Christmas wishes to good old St. Nick, WestJetters took notes and got ready to shop quick. It was a great rush with the 2 flights in the air to get all those presents. Not a moment to spare.
St. Paul's ringing, there's children singing tonight. Lights are bright, I know it's a beautiful sight. Snowflakes falling on the road, snowy and white. And Santa's coming to town, it's coming tonight.
Hey, Thomas, let's get it.
Christmas cheer and celebrations all across.
cell 8.
Merry Christmas! Where's the Hughes family?
The guests never expected what they'd asked of St. Nick would actually appear. It was all quite a trick. A Westjetter would say it was more than mere fun. Miracles do happen when we all work as one. We'll give Santa the last word on this most special night.
Merry Christmas to all! And to all, a good flight!
Is that good? Is that good? Don't get any ideas. We're not doing that tonight. But let me tell you. So what? Why don't you whisper to your neighbor? Who did you not want to be in that video? All right. Go ahead and whisper to your neighbor. Who did you not want to be? All right. We got that done. Now let's see. Who did you want to be in that video? All right. Whisper to your neighbor. Who did you want to be? See, millions of people saw this video, and it's a marketing genius. Millions and millions of people saw this video, and he is known as the socks and underwear guy. Right? And as you watch this, you're like, really, dude? Like, really? If you only knew that this was real, you wouldn't ask for socks and underwear. You would ask for the TV, right? The huge big screen TV. If you only knew this was real, you would ask for so much more. Listen. There are people wandering this world pretending that the coming of Jesus, that very first Christmas, is nothing more than a fantasy fun time, and that God has nothing more to offer than socks and underwear. And if you knew that God had a greater gift for you, you would say yes. If you knew it is all real, you would say yes. And so let's jump into the Christmas story here. Luke chapter 2, drawing your attention to 8 to 12. You can follow along with me here. I'll read it out loud. It says this: "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, 'Don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah and the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and laying in a manger.'" Now, I don't know about you, but when I read something like that, there's a few words that pop out to me because we don't really use them in our language. I don't hear too many people talking about their kids as saviors, right? You're not using that word when you're describing your children. Or you don't describe your husband and your wife as the Messiah. Or you're not really talking to, maybe you're talking about your boss as the Lord. I don't know. You're not really using these words too often. But yet here they are describing a child. And when I see the word Savior, a Savior is someone who saves people. And to be saved, you need to find yourself in a situation that you can't really deal with yourself, right? Like maybe you're drowning, or maybe you're stuck on a cliff, or maybe you're whatever it is, but you need help, and so you need someone to save you, and that person is a savior. And I don't know if you relate with that, but I really do relate with it, because there are situations that I find myself in this life where I really need someone to save me because I'm overcome with the situation that I find myself in. For example, My oldest son has epilepsy. And so, last weekend, he had a seizure that lasted over an hour. And he wouldn't come out of the seizure, and so we had to call the ambulance. We went and sat at the ER pretty much the whole day. And we look at each other in moments like that, and we say, all right, his rescue meds are not working. Now what do we do? Because there's nothing we can do. And I don't control this thing. And I'm his dad, and I want to help out in this situation. My wife and I look at each other, and we're like, we're clueless. We're overcome by this situation. And the very first time he had one, we were just helpless because he's stuck in this thing that we can't get him out of. And in the midst of that, I'm wondering, I need a savior in this thing. I need someone to help me out here. I need something to do something because I'm overcoming this. Or my 3 children, one of the joys that I find as a dad is catching my children when they come out and I feel their first breath they take in their life. But my 3rd child, Bowen, I didn't get that opportunity because he came out and he wasn't breathing. And they took my child, my boy, and they placed him on a table away from me, and the doctors went to work on him to resuscitate him. And as I'm looking there, what seems like an eternity, as they work on my son, I'm standing there and I look at my wife and we don't know what to do because we can't do anything. And in that moment, we need someone to help us out. We are overcome in that situation and we need a savior. We need someone to save us, to help us out. Or, a few years ago, my grandpa, someone was outside of his apartment and they could hear groaning inside, but they didn't hear words and he wasn't responding. And so I went over and I had to break the door down, and there I found my grandpa who had a stroke laying on the ground. And as I sit there and as I look at him and as I hold him, I don't know what to do. And I call 911 and I don't know how to respond to this situation. I don't know what to help him or how to help him. And I'm overcome in this moment because I'm at the end of myself and I have no other choice but to say, okay, you got to take this because I'm out of control in this situation. And when moments like that happen in my life, and I'm sure they happen in yours too, I read verses like this found in John 16:33. And this is coming out of the mouth of Jesus as an adult. He's a child, right? And we celebrate the child on Christmas, but he's an adult when he speaks these things. And man, isn't this the truth? In this world, you're going to have trouble. You will have trouble. And we all know that. We've all been there. We've all had some type of trouble one way or another. It comes right out of the mouth of Jesus, and we all know that that's totally true in our lives. But a lot of us don't like to talk about it. We don't like to admit it, maybe. Most of us hide or pretend. And we never have the audacity to have these candid conversations that maybe we need to have. But finally, when our plans fail and we are overcome because we need a Savior, we finally say, you know what, that's it, and I need something more. And listen, the angels show up that very night, and they show up to the shepherds, and they show up to Mary, and they show up to Joseph, and they say this: a Savior has come into the world for those moments when you are overcome and you can't do it yourself. He came to save you, to be with you in those moments. And he overcame so that you could overcome. Listen, and if you knew how great the plan is of God for you, you would overcome whatever you find yourself in. And you would say yes to God, because in that moment, it all changed. In that moment, in an instant, what seemed dark became light. What seemed desperate became stress-free. What seemed hopeless became hope-filled. In a moment, God pushes open the door, like in that video. And what seemed downcast and stressful and worryful about what's going to happen next, he opens the door into our world, and there is a baby. And we could breathe again. And we could hope again. And we were overcome because he overcame. You see, the end of that verse in John 16:33, if we read that whole verse, it goes like this: I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you're going to have trouble. But listen, take heart, because I have overcome the world. And see, the definition of overcome is like this: to defeat a problem or prevail, to overpower or overwhelm. And I tried to think about someone. Is there someone who's overcome something? They've overpowered and overwhelmed something in their life that they've dealt with in the past. And I tried to think about it. And a lady named Karen, who's part of the family here at Southgate, she wrote this letter for you tonight. about something she went through when she was 16 and something she's just dealt with now. And I want to read that for you. It's directly from her, Karen, and she writes this. She says, when I was 16, I borrowed the family van to go to a party. And on the way home, I came around a gentle curve and my tires touched the gravel. I was sober and I was going the speed limit, but I was inexperienced, and the slip of the wheel, it rattled me. I overcorrected, I lost control, and I crashed head-on into another car. It was occupied by a mom and her 7-year-old daughter. There are no words to describe the horror that followed. It took a long, long time for help to arrive on that dark, deserted country road. We were all taken to a tiny rural hospital with one hallway, and somehow I came to be sitting at the little girl's bedside. She had suffered cuts and bruises, and her father was sitting on the other side of the bed. His wife lay across the hall, suffering from a massive brain injury. Death was near. He told me she'd been on her way home from a Bible study. And then he took my hand, and he looked at me straight in the eye, and he says, "We're Christians. And I want you to know that I forgive you. And my children forgive you. And my wife forgives you." Now you might think that's the end of the story, that I understood the power of Jesus and I gave my life to him, but I didn't. It would take 2 decades of suffering before I would understand. I never told anybody about the terrifying flashbacks because I was so ashamed. I withdrew. I moved far from home. I traveled even further, and in my 20s I was diagnosed with PTSD. And for years the therapist told me it was the accident that caused it, that I had to forgive myself, but I just couldn't. How could any decent person forgive themselves? She survived, but with massive brain injuries, and I destroyed her family and her life. I mean, what kind of person forgives themselves for causing such pain? I learned to carry the guilt. I searched high, I searched low for peace. Self-help books, yoga, meditation, you named it. I buried myself in my work. I numbed myself with alcohol, and worse. Year by year, I grew colder, more cynical, and harder, and I never ever cried. At 38, I became a single mom. I started coming to Southgate mainly because they let you have coffee in church. I was so brittle and tired that I once choked up at the man in the parking lot who smiled and waved at me as I drove in. Slowly, the music started to soften me, and with songs that said things like there is hope for the hopeless, and we are no longer slaves to fear. People would sing loud, they would raise their arms in praise, and I would think, silly Christians, as if. And then one day, the sermon was about forgiveness. And as you know by now, forgiveness is not for the likes of me, but Pastor Ben kept saying that Jesus forgives, and I allowed myself to merely wonder, if I let myself feel forgiven, what would that feel like? And instantly, a light washed through me, and I was overcome with a powerful feeling of peace. It was all gone. The guilt, the shame, the pain, it all washed away, and I felt so light that I could float away. It was Jesus. He was right there in the room. He forgave me, and for a moment, I touched the same powerful heart of grace that inspired the woman's husband to show me forgiveness on that black night 25 years ago. In that moment, my chains were broken. I was no longer a slave to fear, and I wept. The problem is that words fail to convey an experience like this. It seems so implausible, so irrational. Perhaps you don't think a horrible past could ever be forgiven, or perhaps you just don't believe that things like this can happen at all. I get it, but I'm writing this letter anyways, because there may be someone out there who's carrying a heavy burden, who is hard, who is lonely, who is desperate or completely broken, just like me. I want to tell you that Jesus can give you peace, that Jesus forgives, and that Jesus overcame so that you could overcome. See, it changed in a moment, in an instant. And the story of Christmas is that it can change in a moment and an instant for Karen. And it can change in a moment and in an instant for you. See, the baby lying in a manger overcame the world, overcame your hurt, overcame your pain, overcame your brokenness. And so here's my encouragement for you. Don't settle for socks and underwear this Christmas. Settle for a gift far greater. far greater than socks and underwear. His name is Jesus. And if you knew the heart of God, you would say yes. Because listen, at the heart of God is you. And that's cause for celebration. That is cause to celebrate. And that is the reason that we give gifts on Christmas. That's the reason we put the tree up. That's the reason why it's a glutton fest on Christmas, right? That's the reason you stuff your face with treats all day long, because it's joyful. It's hope-filled. And what once looked dark is now light and full of hope and full of joy and full of gladness. And that can be your story. And so in a moment, we're going to celebrate. We're going to stand up, we're going to sing, and we're going to sing out and one of the favorite songs. And it is my prayer that you would leave here hope-filled, renewed, restored, and ready to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And so let me pray as we transition. Heavenly Father, man, I just thank you for the story that you've told, a story that we hear every single Christmas, but a story that we can get something new from every single one. I thank you that you overcame so that we could overcome the struggles that we face in our life. And so because of that, we thank you, we praise you, we want to sing, we want to celebrate the coming of a King, King Jesus. Pray these things in his holy name. Amen. Would you stand with us and sing?